Thank you. All right, so what I'm going to be talking about is something that's very important to me in my teaching, which is building connections within my course. And this is something I've done as a TA and something I've done as an instructor. And it overlaps a bit with both the Wellness Eng group and Sarah's work. So if there is some overlap, I think that's a really good sign. So what I'm going to be focusing on are the connections that I can build that you can build as an instructor and or a TA, connections that you can help your students build through peer-to-peer, and then an overall classroom community. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is the instructor and TA connections. And so the big goals that I always identify when I'm coming at this as an instructor or a TA is that I want to identify myself as an individual involved in the course, and I want to open up communication with students. So my biggest thing is that I always want to remind students that I'm not just a robot behind the computer. I'm not just a person that uploads videos and slides and then disappears. I want to remind students that it's not just the robot, it's actually me behind the computer working and hoping that they enjoy the coursework or the materials that we're sharing and to help their learning experience, because the topics that I engage with are actually ones that I'm very passionate about. And so I want to make sure that students know this. So generally what I do is I open up and I tell students who I am. And so I do this through a variety of ways. So first of all, I put my picture out there. I generally also do a video introduction where I share who I am, why I'm at the University of Waterloo, and usually something fun about myself. And then what I also make sure I do is I make sure that students know who I am on a regular basis, and I keep an instructional profile on all of my teaching or TA or workshop facilitator profiles. And usually what I share are my pronouns. That way students know that I'm comfortable sharing this and that if they ever want to share with me, I will support them and make sure that I'm being respectful. I share who I am at the university. So I am a PhD candidate in developmental psychology, and I work with the Social Development Lab. I also tell them that I work for the Center for Teaching Excellence as a TA workshop facilitator. And then depending if students ask what I really do beyond all this, I'm also a research intern for Holland Bloorview Kids Rehab Hospital. And so all of this adds up to students kind of getting a bigger picture of who I am, and that I begin to look like a more well-rounded human being versus, again, just that one person who's uploading files every week. The other thing I try to do is I try to engage students in more interactive and fun ways to get to know us. And this is something that I've instituted in my past 2 courses with our entire instructional team. So we've used D2L's Learn. And what we do is we set up surveys where we ask students to guess the untruth out of 2 truths and an untruth that we share with them. And so then what we do, so mine are usually, I prefer coffee over tea. I know how to roller skate and figure skate, and I binge watch BuzzFeed Unsolved and can quote episodes. And so these are what I typically share, and I ask students to guess which are my untruths. And so what happens is usually I get a bunch of responses. Turns out I'm very transparent to my students, and they tend to guess me out pretty easily. So my truths tend to be that I really do love BuzzFeed Unsolved, even if ghost stories usually really scare me. And I share a picture of myself dressing up as a creature from the show. I also know how to figure skate, and I started to roller skate over the pandemic summer. And I am trying very hard to stop screaming when I roll down the hill. And my untruth is that I drink way more coffee than tea. And really, I actually always have my mug of tea with me. And it's gotten to the point now that when students come by my student hours, they joke like, you know, Professor Green, do you have your tea ready? And so these are little facts they gain about me that makes me seem like someone that they can talk to. I'm a lot less threatening. And I start to seem like someone they can share their own identities and their own facts about them. So the other big thing that I have had to institute and I really want to showcase that has come up through the pandemic is this idea of showing grace. And this has been touched upon by the Wellness Eng group as well as Sarah. So I want to kind of break it down the way that I think about it. So showing grace is recognizing that we have a lot going on. It's things that I could never have predicted as an undergrad or a graduate student or as a TA that our students would be experiencing right now. And so what's happening now is that students are sharing more concerns than ever about their academics, their mental health, their family situations, and their future concerns. And what happens a lot is that because I have opened myself up as being someone that they can talk to, is that I get a lot of things shared to me that I don't think they would share otherwise. And so the biggest thing I remind myself is that I'm there to listen. I'm not there to judge students. I'm there to hear what they are telling me and to recognize what they are dealing with. And then what my other task is to do is to respond. When students have taken this very scary step of reaching out and telling me something that is going on in their lives, that they're worried about, that is impacting them, I work with students. And so that means that I set myself up as a set point that they can contact with, that I will help them manage deadlines, which is often the biggest thing. They say, there's so much going on. I don't think I can meet the deadline. What can I do? And so I can work with them on that front. I also can refer them to services. So that can be academic services like the Writing Center or job services. I have a lot of students tell me they get stressed out about co-op. So I refer them onto the Job Center or onto resources I have myself. And I also check in. I try not to check in too much because I know from personal experience and also working with my students that by checking in too often, it becomes this idea of, I am worried about your success in a way that makes me doubt you. So when I check in maybe once a week, it becomes more of an idea of, hey, how's it going? You doing okay? Great. Let me know if you need anything. And it becomes much less stressful on the students. And then the final thing is that I set boundaries. And so this is very important because I cannot be an effective instructor or TA for my students if I am losing my own sense of well-being or I am becoming overwhelmed. And so in order to best help my students, I protect myself by setting working hours. I let my students know that no, I will not be answering emails at 1 in the morning. You can send them, I won't be answering them. I know when to refer on to others. So I know I am not a trained clinician. I'm not a trained co-op recruiter. I know when to send students to other resources to help them. And I also hold students accountable. And I tell students this, I am here to listen, I am here to help, but I also want you to hold up your end of the deal. And for a lot of students, knowing that I still hold them to a standard is very comforting because this indicates to them that I still think that they can do it and that they have a sense of autonomy and control in what they are doing. So these are all things that you can do as an instructor or a TA. The other thing that I like doing is to remind students that they are part of a wider classroom community. And so one of the big things is to institute peer-to-peer interactions. They don't get to do this in our new online world as much because what used to happen was you would walk into your lecture hall, you would sit down next to the person next to you and you go, hey, did you manage to get coffee before lecture? Or, oh goodness, did you remember to do the assignment yesterday? And you would get that sort of feeling of a bond with everyone in your class that we don't have as much now unless you have pre-established bonds. So my goals in instituting peer-to-peer interaction is to create a classroom environment between students to help alleviate feelings of disconnect and loneliness in students and to share knowledge and course interest between the students. So one of the ways that I do this is the very typical class introductions. We use a course discussion board typically, and we ask students to share their names, their pronouns if they feel comfortable or if they want us to know this. And then we tend to switch it up. So what we tend to do is we ask something that's linked to the course or the degree. So we say, why this class? What degree or year are you in? Why did you pick your degree? What is something you're looking forward to in this class? And I typically pick one question at a time. And then moving beyond the course thing, because a lot of students I think are used to this sort of why your degree. I know I get this question a lot when I go home and people are like, so you're doing a PhD because, and so instead I also ask, tell us something fun. What would be something you would normally never tell an instructor? What's a fake fact that you would share to a stranger or share a picture of? And so the share the picture of has actually been one of our most successful things because what we typically try to do is we ask students to share things like, what's your current workspace? Who's your work buddy? What's your favorite mug that you use when you're studying? And it gets students to start to see each other as their own individuals. And what actually happened this semester that was really cool is because we made this into a discussion board, we didn't tell students they had to interact with each other. But what they did was they started responding to each other's posts. And so we had a lot of like, oh, I love your mug. I have one like it. Or you said this was your favorite artist. Have you heard this song by them? Or did you hear this collaboration? And we ended up having a lot of really great discussions this way. The other way to do it is actually through integrating it through your assessment. And this might not be something you can do as a TA, but as an instructor, this is a peer-to-peer assessment that I've instituted in a couple of my courses now, and we call it Learn One, Teach One. And so it has three key components. So in Learn One, we use discussion boards. Students post on the discussion board about that week's content, and they post a question. So they say, what didn't I understand? What do I want to know more about? So I typically teach developmental psychology. And so this might be a question like, did you understand those stages of development in learning? And so they would ask a question about something they are uncertain about and that they might not otherwise ask, because sometimes asking and admitting you don't know can be very scary. And then, in order to get peers talking to each other, we then institute Teach One, which is where students then respond to their peers' questions. And they can respond to it in a variety of ways, which is like, here's what helped me understand. Here's some cool facts about. If you like this, you should look at. And what happens is that we take a lot of the fear out of admitting you don't know. And we also let students show their own expertise and their own strength of knowledge in a way that empowers them. So that way they no longer feel like they're just kind of hoarding knowledge away in the back of their head. They start being able to take on a bit of that role of teaching, which then can help them learn as they move through the course. And at the very end, we use a final review. And we ask students to reflect on what did you learn this semester and how were the concepts that you taught to others linked? And again, it helps them identify what did they learn, how did they help others, and it keeps building that community. So finally, this is a big one. So we've gone from my little instructor role to talking to peers, and now this is the whole community. This is where the instructors talk, the TAs talk, and the students all talk to each other. And so what we talk about is the goals for this is to form a wider supportive community, maintain course engagement and interest, and create an open system of communication. And so I do this through three ways that do overlap quite a bit with Sarah's, which is why it was really great to see them. So ways to stay connected are announcements. These keep students on track and they let students know that you're engaged with the course. So it's not that you've uploaded the course content and then you've left. You're actually staying engaged and you're going, hey, I noticed that students really liked this content last week. Let's talk about it. And so this could be reminders, it could be check-ins, it could be weekly hellos. Like Sarah, I really like sharing like little bits of information. So I share like, did you know that we had snow in Waterloo this week for everyone that's moved away? Or did you know that we have new cool signs all over campus and I still get lost? So these are ways to kind of keep students engaged and to remind them that there is a community going on. A second method is through sharing resources. And so this is to get students thinking outside the course. And so this is also to let students know that you're interested in encouraging growth. So what I do is that I try to share interesting talks, events, networking, and/or job opportunities. And this is, again, helping students think about what's connected. And this shares outside the course. And I'm in psychology. And so a lot of our students are in psychology because they want to know more. And so if I say, hey, there's this really cool talk, they can then integrate it back into the course. Finally, this is one of my favorite tools. I'm part of the internet generation, I always joke. I grew up using a lot of GIFs. I use reaction images. I drive my family insane by the amount of pictures I use instead of answering. And I use these to get students' attention. I know myself, I get really bored if I'm just reading text over and over again. And it lets students know that you've put effort and time into tailoring the course. So you can use images, GIFs, videos, etc. And it just kind of keeps that idea of I'm keeping my hand into the course. I haven't left you. I'm still here. And these are one of the things that gets most commented on in my feedback. And students say, hey, thank you for taking the time to make this fun. Or I get so frustrated just reading the textbook. And it's kind of funny that you put this video in instead of me having to read the textbook. And so these are things that really get students engaged. One thing I do is I also create platforms where students can talk to each other. So one of my favorites from this semester is, oops, I will show it to you in a minute. I forgot that I was showing you the examples of my multimedia first. So these are some of my favorite multimedia examples. I have my little Bitmoji who runs around my course content. So I've designed myself, you saw her a little bit earlier, and I use that as cues for my students. So I use stuff like saying, don't forget there's a test tomorrow, or Don't forget to hand in your assignment. And so again, it's that visual reminder and it's also personalized to me. So that way they know I'm the one that's coming in and saying, hi, don't forget, or hey, I want you to succeed. And I also really love using images and GIFs. So like this is one that I might send as a good luck this week or don't study too hard. This is one that I used this week actually as a welcome to March. Hope you guys all find some four-leaf clovers. Again, it's breaking up the monotony of just reading lecture stuff. As I mentioned, this was one of my favorite things that we created this semester. And what we'd noticed in our introductions, that was a lot of students were sharing images of their pets as their study buddies. And I do the same. And so what we decided on doing was creating a Padlet where students could share their pets. And it becomes this nice little serotonin bump. And students go in and they check in on everyone's pets and again, it's that sense of community because then I have students go like, hey, how's Molly doing? Molly is one of my cats. She is currently hiding in my room instead of on my desk as she would normally. And again, it's that feeling of being able to recognize that there are other people in the course and that you're not alone. And this is, I think, one of the most beneficial things is just identifying for students that you're not alone. We haven't left you. You're still here. There are other people like you and we care. And so that's the biggest thing that I want to take away from this is that these are all techniques just to basically remind students that there is a voice at the end of the computer and that we do want them to succeed and we do care and we do want to share things. So thank you all for listening to my portion of the panel. I am always available for questions. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. So I'll be answering questions to the rest of the panelists at the end of this. You can always email me. I'm happy to talk over email or over video. And I really appreciate everyone showing up today and being interested in this topic.